What's up everybody, I'm HoopsandHipHop. So a few weeks ago I shared with you some odd facts about Ash, Brock, and Misty that many of you didn't know, and it seems like you guys really enjoyed that video. So I decided to come back and do the same thing with Team Rocket, but this time I decided to keep the focus on the term odd. The facts I'm going to share with you guys today in this video are very odd in terms of just being very uncommon, but many of them are also just very unusual in general. I really had to dig around to find these, so I'll be impressed if you guys know very many of them at all. With all that being said though, let's go ahead and take a look. Alright, so our first fact is actually in relation to one of the other facts I talked about in that Ash, Misty, and Brock video. If you guys watched that video, you would remember how I talked about some unusual last names that have been specified for Brock and Misty. Well, there is actually an unusual last name like that that has also been specified for James of Team Rocket. In some of the same publications that listed Misty's last name as Williams, they also listed James' last name as Morgan. Now, while this is a bit unusual to learn that James actually has a last name like this, the last name Morgan in particular actually does make a lot of sense because, as we know, James's family is rich, so the last name Morgan could actually be a reference to J.P. Morgan, who is one of the richest men in American history who lived in the 1800s and early 1900s. This next one is a reference in pop culture to Team Rocket, and it is pretty odd, so I thought I would put it on this list because I got a kick out of it, and that would have to do with the world of hip-hop, believe it or not. Now, I don't know how many of you guys listen to hip-hop, but there is an artist out there by the name of Lil Uzi Vert. And he actually has a song that he did called Team Rocket. And this is actually a direct reference to Jessie and James of Team Rocket. And the reason why this reference was made is because Lil Uzi Vert and his girlfriend actually have similar hair colors to Jessie and James. And they're kind of a dynamic duo, I guess, similar to Jessie and James, where Lil Uzi kind of has the purplish blue hair like James, and his girlfriend has the reddish hair like Jessie. So kind of odd, but still kind of a cool reference to see by a major musical artist. Now, while the anime is based on the games and many of the things in the anime come directly from the games, there are also a lot of things that are anime exclusive that originated from the anime, and Jessie and James are obviously one of those things. Now, when the anime first started, Takeshi Shudo was the original head writer, so he was responsible for coming up with all of these anime exclusive things, obviously, and he was the one who basically wrote in Team Rocket into the story. Well, when it comes to his inspirations for Team Rocket, it's actually pretty interesting because Jessie is actually partially based on Takeshi Shudo's ex-girlfriend that he had in high school. She's also partially based on Majo from the Time Bokon anime series. However, I think the fact that his girlfriend did him so bad that he based a villain in what would become one of the most iconic animated shows of all time after her, and now she kind of has to live with that for the rest of her life, I mean, that's pretty savage on his end, but it's also pretty indicative of what she probably did to him when they were in high school. In the, as of right now, most recent games in the Pokemon franchise, Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon, we actually saw the return of Team Rocket in the form of Team Rainbow Rocket. And Giovanni made his magical reappearance into the games as the leader of a team comprised of all the other team leaders. Along with this, Giovanni got some fancy new artwork, and he's striking a sinister pose in that artwork, but the interesting thing about that pose is that it's actually the same exact pose as his signature Pokemon in the games, Mega Mewtwo X, just mirrored to the other side. Now, while we do learn some interesting things about Team Rocket in the anime, we can also learn some interesting things about them from the manga as well. And one of the things that the manga teaches us is that the word rocket in Team Rocket is actually an acronym. Rocket actually stands for Raid on the City, Knock Out Evil Tusks. Now, this is kind of indicative of what Team Rocket does because obviously they do like to raid cities, but Knock Out Evil Tusks is kind of hard to decipher. If you guys have any ideas, let me know. We might be able to crack the code on what Team Rocket is all about. Now, I'm sure if you guys have watched the original Indigo League series of the anime, you would remember the one episode where we learn about James's backstory and his relationship with his Growlithe Growly. This is a very memorable episode because not only is it a tearjerker, but it also shows a human, more kinder side of James, which is very interesting to see considering he's a villain in the show. Now, the story of James and his beloved Growlithe is actually inspired by a novel written in the 1800s called A Dog of Flanders. This novel was written in Belgium by an author that goes by the pseudonym Ouida, and this novel actually became very popular in Japan of all places, so much so in fact that it got adapted into TV shows and even animated movies. Now, the story of A Dog of Flanders is very tragic, much like James's story with Growlithe, but I just really find it very interesting and also odd that a Belgian book written in the 1800s ultimately inspired something from Pokemon that originates in Japan. Once again, in the original Indigo League series of the anime, not only do we have Jessie and James as an iconic pair of Team Rocket members, but we also have their counterparts, Butch and Cassidy. Now, you might know the less odd fact that their names actually come from American outlaws Jessie James and Butch Cassidy, but did you notice that their hair actually resembles every version of the Generation 1 games that ever released? You've got Jessie's red hair, which represents red version, you've got Butch's green hair, which represents green version, you've got Cassidy's blonde hair, which represents yellow version, and even though it's a bit of a stretch, you've got James's purple bluish hair, which could be correlated to blue version as well. This isn't really something I've ever seen mentioned before because I honestly just noticed it myself without having found it in some sort of article or on the internet anywhere, so I thought it was pretty interesting and noteworthy. We're not quite done with the hair facts yet though, because I've got another one here that I personally noticed myself that I think will probably blow your mind. If you look to Heart Gold and Soul Silver, you'll see that the Team Rocket admin's hair color are actually very similar to that of Jessie and James, making this a likely reference to the duo. On top of that, even though we see Petrol and Ariana having two different shades of red as their hair color, being magenta and red respectively, this actually fits in with a very little known aspect of Jessie's design. In the older episodes of the anime, when the cells were hand-colored, Jessie's hair color was red, but in the episodes after Here's Looking at You, Elekid, they switched to digitally colored animation, and this is when Jessie's hair color became magenta, which perfectly coincides with the two different hair colors of the Team Rocket admins. Furthermore, if we take a look at Ariana, who has the old red hair color of Jessie, she is actually based on the old female Rocket character design from Generation 2, whereas Petrol, the guy who has the magenta new hair that represents new Jessie, he was actually designed from scratch, making him the newer character of the two. Now, all of this seems way too coincidental to just be a coincidence, so I'm sure it's a very elaborate Easter egg on Game Freak's part, which if it is, I applaud them. However, if it does happen to be a coincidence, that's gotta be one of the biggest gaming coincidences I have ever seen. Switching from Team Rocket's hairstyles to their uniforms, Team Rocket's uniforms are actually based on the uniforms of the Bosozoku motorcycle gang, which became very prevalent in Japan in the 1980s and 90s, around about the time when Pokemon was being created. As interesting as this is though, it gets even more interesting when we consider that this is very subtly referenced in the anime in the episode The Bridge Bike Gang, where we run into a biker gang and we find out that Jessie and James, members of Team Rocket, actually were a part of this biker gang at some point in the past. And rounding out the list, we have what is probably one of the most odd facts on this list, and that would be that a member of Team Rocket in the anime actually had his gender changed from the Japanese version of the anime to the international version. In the Legend of Thunder TV movie, we actually meet two Rocket executives that serve as the antagonists for the movie, and they go by the names Attila and Hun. Now, while Hun is explicitly male in the original Japanese version, his gender was actually changed to female in many of the international releases, including English. First off, his, or rather her name in English is Hun, which obviously does sound feminine. On top of that, the appearance of Hun is very, very feminine in general, and I believe this is the reason why many of the international versions decided to change his gender to that of a female. On top of that, if you listen to Hun's voice in the English dub, it is very, very obviously a female voice. Not only is she voiced by Veronica Taylor, who is obviously a female, but the voice voice that Veronica Taylor gives Hun is very much that of a female. It's not like an Ash voice where it's like a male intended voice. This is very much a female intended voice that we hear in the English dub. On top of this, Hun is actually referred to directly as a female in the Brazilian version of the movie, and in the Portuguese version, Hun is named Ana, which once again is a common female name in Portuguese. And there it is, everybody. Now, I was truly impressed by how many odd and unique things I was able to find out about Team Rocket, but what did you guys think of the list? Was everything here new to you? Did you know something already? Was there one fact in particular that stood out to you at all? Let me know in the comments because I am really excited to hear what you guys have to say on all this. If you guys enjoyed the video, be sure to leave a like because that really helps out, and if you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe for way more Pokemon content each and every week. Oh, and one more quick thing I forgot to mention, I'm actually going to be doing a Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee giveaway. If I can get to 1,500 followers on Spotify and get to 6,000 monthly listeners, I will be giving away a copy of both games, a copy of Let's Go Pikachu and a copy of Let's Go Eevee. Now, honestly, we're not that far off from these numbers. I have a little bit over 500 followers on Spotify right now, and I'm at about 4,000 listeners, so I really only need 1,000 followers and 2,000 more listeners to be able to do this for you guys, and considering there's almost 68,000 of you, if just a fraction of you watching this video, go ahead and drop a follow on Spotify and put a couple songs of mine in your playlist, we will have no problem accomplishing this, especially considering we've got like several months to do it. That's all I really had to say though, so I hope to see you guys over on Spotify, and as for here on YouTube, the next video will be coming out on Tuesday, so I will see you guys again for that, and until then, as always, thanks again for watching, and I will smell you guys later.